lawyers and affiliates for the mutual benefit and the promotion of legal ideas. Both organizations are recognized by the Law Society, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and their respective bar associations. Right now, I'm going to introduce you to Tim Pearce, who's a policy officer for the SRA, and he's going to start the session. You, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just say I'm just going to introduce Carol Cook, who's education manager for this area, and I'll hand over to Carol, who will cover the first few slides.
Thanks very much, Tim. Well, I'm sort of tempted to say good evening, everyone, because it's just getting dark here. And what time is it? It's just after 6 p.m. But I hope that the light's okay. I'm trying to have it as complimentary as possible. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation to you. We've got about about 14, 15 slides, which will take you through, first of all, what we require all individuals to do to qualify now as a Solicitor of England and Wales. And then what Tim's going to pick up is some sort of specific provisions we have in place for lawyers who are already qualified. So if I can just move on to, and then I think at the end we have got some questions. We've got time for some questions, but if questions occur to you as we go along, please just pop them in the chat, and if we can pick them up as we go along, we will, but otherwise we will pick them up at the end. So I think the first thing is just really to try and capture what we do as the Solicitors Regulation Authority and what our key priorities are. And we've got this on the second slide. So we're the regulatory body of solicitors and law firms in England and Wales. And we regulate more than 200,000 solicitors. And what that really means is, I suppose, from the point of qualification, we set the standard. We set the standard that must be met for qualifying as a solicitor. But also we want to give them, we don't want to constrain them unreasonably and unnecessarily. So we want them to be able to provide legal services as flexibly as possible. We want to encourage the provision of accessible and affordable services for the public, protect the public, help them understand what the protections are. And this is where the work of the education and training team comes in, is we want to make sure that solicitors have the right skills when they enter the profession. And that's really the function of SQE, of the new Solicitors Qualifying Examination. I say it's new. It was first delivered in November 2021, but it was a very long time in development. And of course, it replaced an education and training regime that had been in some place for some 40 years. So quite a significant change. So what is SQE? What does it mean? And what do you have to do to qualify? And that's on the next slide, Tim, which is the one with the jigsaw pieces on.
Hi, Carol, can you see that?
No, we're still on.
This is not
It's possible
really
that there's a delay in response. So
right.
That's it. We're there now.
Yep.
We're there now. Hopefully everyone can see that. So we introduced the SQE in September 2021, and now it's a single robust examination for everyone who wants to qualify as a Solicitor of England and Wales. Before that, we had a number of different routes into the profession. Now we've got one route. Obviously, some of the routes that existed before 2021 are currently in a transitional phase. So we didn't sort of close the door immediately, we did create some transitional arrangements that allowed aspiring solicitors who had started on the old route, for want of a better term, to actually complete it. So in order to qualify, an individual has got to have a university degree or an equivalent level 6 qualification. They must pass SQE 1 and SQE 2. They must complete a minimum of 2 years qualifying work experience, and that's replaced what you might have understood to be the old training contract. So we've replaced training contract with qualifying work experience. And of course, at the point of admission, every individual must also meet our character and suitability requirements. So can we go on to the next slide, Tim, please? Here we go. So just perhaps a bit of insight into why did we, what drove this particular change? Well, first of all, we had over 100 universities delivering law degrees and setting their own standards. We had a lack of flexibility in terms of how you prepared for your qualification. You had to have specific educational and training requirements. And then, of course, there's the high cost of qualification. So the cost of an undergraduate degree, and on top of that, there would be the cost of the legal practice course, which was the professional qualification. And then on top of that would be relatively low, well, minimum salaries for trainees during the period of their training contract. So there were a number of issues that really caused us to look at what we were requiring individuals to do to qualify, and to consider whether or not there were other ways that we could still meet the standard that we needed to, but perhaps address some of those issues. And after 5 or 6 years of consultation and development and piloting, we have what we call SQE 1 and SQE 2. And the advantage is that the fact that everybody does the same assessment, we have that greater assurance of consistent high standards at the point of admission. And also, because we no longer specify a very narrow set of educational inputs, for want of a better way of describing it, then individuals can choose how they prepare themselves for the assessment. They can choose how long they spend, and they can choose where they do it and how they do it. So it gives the individual greater choice over the sorts of training tools and opportunities that perhaps best suit both their financial situation and also their preferred way of learning. I think also, if you've got to bear in mind that one of our key objectives is the protection of the public. So we have an obligation to make sure that when we grant someone a license to practice, we have an assurance that they are competent to deliver legal services. And so that gives us a better assurance. We felt it provided a fairer sort of landscape really for candidates, because everyone was assessed on a level playing field. It provides, well, we hopefully generates a more competitive training market and more cost-effective training opportunities as the market responds to sort of consumer demand really. And also we have that greater flexibility. Okay, so the detail, the devil's always in the detail, isn't it? So SQE1, everyone's got to do SQE1, and SQE1 is what we call a test of functioning legal knowledge. Now that means that what we really want to know is whether an individual understands how they would apply the law in the sorts of contexts in which a client might come and ask for legal advice. So we have SQE1 is made up of what we call foundation. We have FLK1 and FLK2. So we have a whole breadth of legal knowledge that we require individuals to know at the point of qualification, and we've split those up into FLK1 and FLK2. So for example, FLK1 contains contract law, the law of tort, constitutional law. There's some elements of the legal services market and our professional conduct regime. FLK2 includes some of the more practice-based areas, for example, conveyancing, property practice, criminal litigation. It also contains land law, wills and trusts, and probate. So 280 multiple choice question exams completed over 2 days. And an individual has got to pass both FLK1 and FLK2. And everyone has 3 attempts within a 6-year period. Having passed SQE1, that then an individual is then eligible to go on and attempt SQE2. An SQE2 is a test of legal knowledge, or it's a test of the application of legal skills in the context of particular areas of practice. So there are 12 written tests and 4 oral tests, and they are sort of, they reflect realistic type scenarios that you would expect to meet as a newly qualified solicitor working in practice. So they're very, very practice based. So for example, an oral assessment in criminal litigation might include making a bail application before a judge in the magistrate's court, in a criminal court, or it might mean making an interim application before a district judge in a civil matter. But it will also include advising a client, say for example, who has who seeks advice in relation to a probate matter, or in relation to a particular aspect of a property transaction or a conveyancing transaction. Professional conduct we assess in both SQE1 and SQE2. And those 16 assessments combine, if you like, to produce a single mark, a single pass mark. We don't adopt a pass mark of a sort of simple 50%, that if you get 50% you're over the threshold, which is the sort of more typical way that assessments are marked. But what we do is each SQE1 and SQE2 will have a pass mark which is calculated according to what we call psychometrically reliable and defensible and robust measures, so that we know that every candidate who has met that particular passing score is safe to practice. I think what I should say is what's probably really important for you to know, or helpful for you to know, is SQE1 can be taken in centres around the world.
Sorry to
think
interrupt you,
that's
Carol. Tim, please can you admit the people waiting in the lobby? Apologies. There are quite a few people waiting in the lobby. If you admit them in the participant section.
Oh yes. So
Just admit all of them. Yeah, just admit all of them.
admit all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yes, I wasn't aware of that.
So I think we delivered SQE1 this time in, so we did, SQE1 is delivered through Pearson View test centres, which some of you might be familiar with, and they operate around the world. And I think we delivered the last delivery of SQE1. I think we operated in about 29 different countries.
Sorry, Carol. Hi, could you all please mute your mics if you're joining in, please? Apologies.
Okay. And for SQE2, currently all the written assessments can also be taken in Pearson View test centres abroad, but currently the oral assessments, which run over 2 days, can only be taken in the UK because they are done on a one-to-one basis, they're face-to-face. I can't think of anything for the moment that might be useful for you to know, but I sort of feel I've bombarded you with quite a lot of detail, and so perfectly understandable if at the end of this you have some questions. But I think where we wanted to get to, Tim and I, was for you to, because as qualified lawyers you are potentially eligible for exemption from SQE1 or SQE2 or both, provided you meet a certain set of requirements. But we felt it was quite important context for you to understand what it was you were seeking exemption or you were eligible for exemption from. If you are not a qualified lawyer, we do not grant exemptions. So I think, Tim, are you going to pick up now on qualifying work experience and then just go through some of the pointers on exemption?
Thank you. Qualifying work experience does not apply in the case of qualified lawyers. There are regulations actually exempt qualified lawyers from the qualifying work experience requirement. But as this is a diverse audience, we thought that it was worth putting in a slide on it and quickly outlining what qualifying work experience is. It's one of the elements which you must complete in order to be admitted, as well as the SQE. And you can do it in any order. You could do it before the SQE or after doing it. It must complete 2 years equivalent full time. So it could be, say, 4 years working half normal hours. And the idea is that it gives you experience of real life legal work. It has to be done with qualifying work experience. Your employer needs to be a provider of legal services. But beyond that, it's fairly flexible. It should give you the opportunity to develop some or all of the competencies needed to be a solicitor. So you don't have to develop all of them, and there's no requirement that you reach any particular level. Qualifying work experience is not assessed, and it is flexible to the sort of work that you are doing. The only thing that we will need at the end of your period of qualifying work experience is confirmation from a solicitor that they can typically be your supervisor, but they don't have to be. It could be another solicitor working in the organization. But we need a confirmation from them, and it's a very basic confirmation that you've done 2 years equivalent, and that you have been engaged in legal services that gave you opportunity to develop competence as a solicitor. It can also be gained with up to 4 employers in total. So you could do, 6 months or so at 4 different employers. We'd need a sign off from a solicitor in each one, but apart from that, it is fairly flexible. So that's a quick outline of qualifying work experience. On the basis that most of the audience is qualified lawyers, I'll now go on to talk about the situation if you are already qualified as a lawyer. First of all, the old system, the Qualified Lawyer Transfer Scheme, that is replaced by the SQE. So that old scheme, subject to some transitional arrangements, is now over. And in fact, the QLTS assessments have now finished, but you've still got a potential for the last little bit of the transitional arrangements. And anyone who's got a question about that can contact our contact centre initially, who will put you through to someone who can assist and advise on your situation if you are under that last bit of the transitional arrangements. Broadly, the transitional arrangements are only open now for people who have done the first part of the old QLTS, which is the multiple choice test that people used to do. And if you've done that and you've not yet done the second part of the QLTS, it's still possible for you to qualify, but you should contact our contact centre initially. So SQE is now the route for all anyone who wants to be a solicitor. It covers qualified lawyers. It also covers all candidates from England and Wales. What we require of qualified lawyers is very similar to what we require of our domestic candidates, as it were, England and Wales unqualified people. You need a degree or an equivalent qualification or experience. The degree can be in any subject. You need to pass the SQE1 and SQE2 assessments, unless there is an exemption, which I will go on to explain. And you need to meet, just the same as for an England and Wales candidate, you would need to meet our character and suitability requirements. That is at point of admission, that last of those. So it's actually when you actually apply for admission that we will then make the character and suitability checks. And that, for a qualified lawyer, will also involve a certificate of good standing, which you can obtain from your own national bar or law society, and they will be familiar with that process. It's an international system for which all law societies and bars take part in. As a qualified lawyer, you don't need qualifying work experience, because clearly you have already gone through a qualification process and you have been admitted on the basis that you have done the training route in your own jurisdiction. The other thing is that QLTS depended on a list that we used to keep of recognised jurisdictions, and if you weren't from a recognised jurisdiction, you had to then ask your bar or law society to apply to us to be put on the list. That has now gone. If you can apply, you can do the SQE if you are a qualified lawyer from anywhere in the world. You can also, as I will come on to, apply for exemptions if you're a qualified lawyer from anywhere in the world. We will then look at your application on its own merits. We don't have a list anymore that we refer to. Is all that clear, or are there any questions at the point? Put any questions in the chat if that general point is clear. And I'll now move on to talk about exemptions. There's just one slide for this, but I will talk about it at a little bit more length than the previous 2 slides. So broadly, we have an approach that says, if you are competent at something and you've demonstrated that competence, we won't retest you in something that you have already demonstrated. What that means in practice is that if through your own home qualification process in your own jurisdiction, you have demonstrated certain competences, which I'll come on to in detail, then you can apply to be exempt from the equivalent SQE assessments. In practice, that means that you must show us, demonstrate to us that you meet the same standards of knowledge and skills that the SQE assesses. So in other words, you can say, I have already been assessed, I've already shown through my own qualification that I have met this standard. And there are exemptions available from both SQE1 and SQE2, but they are very different. As a general point, you can imagine that SQE1 being about functioning legal knowledge, the practical knowledge of practicing law, of practicing conveyancing, of criminal litigation, etc., in England and Wales. There's an awful lot of detail in the specification of SQE1, and we wouldn't expect lawyers from other jurisdictions to have that same knowledge. How would you gain it? You're practicing within the law of your own jurisdiction, and that's going to be different from the law of England and Wales. There isn't even an exemption from SQE1 for Scottish solicitors, for instance. So exemptions from SQE1 are exceptionally rare. We only granted one so far, and that is on very, very exceptional grounds of up to a particular individual who had a quite unique set of circumstances. So exemptions from SQE1 are rare, and that's not to say don't apply, but if you do, then you will need to demonstrate to us that your qualifications and your experience cover every area of law assessed in SQE1, and you would need to actually look at the SQE1 specification. We've got the web addresses of all this information at the end. And you would need to absolutely make sure of that. But, the possibility is there if you can demonstrate it. SQE2 is much more straightforward. Broadly, because we test very carefully in SQE1 the functioning knowledge of the law, we can therefore say, well, lawyers from other jurisdictions, if they sit SQE1 and they prove that they know the law of England and Wales and practice in England and Wales, we can then be more open to recognising the skills that those lawyers bring, which are likely to be, the same or comparable to the skills of a solicitor in England and Wales, because the type of work and the skills that lawyers bring to it across the world will have many points of similarity. What you do for an application for SQE2, again, you go onto our website, the whole process is set out there, but you will need to show that you have the equivalent in terms, first of all, of practice rights. Practice rights being, and it's all set out on our website, the areas in which lawyers most typically practice. Most of them are reserved by law to solicitors in England and Wales. So that's criminal and civil litigation, conveyancing, in other words, the preparation and the transaction of conveyancing instruments to transfer land, and wills and probate. Wills is not a reserved activity in itself, but the actual making an application for grant of probate and administering that is. So those are reserved. The other area, which we call practice rights, is the practice of business organizations and business procedures, company law, etc. And that's because that is such an important and critical area for, you know, so many solicitors of England and Wales. You know, a very large proportion of solicitors practice in that area. So that makes up 5 practice rights broadly. We have criminal litigation, including representing clients at police station. We have civil litigation, or dispute resolution, it could be termed. We have property practice, conveyancing. We have wills and probate, and we have business law and practice. If your qualification in your home country gives you those practice rights, you then have to also say, well, what skills do I exercise in actually exercising these practice rights? These are probably pretty common to all lawyers. It's all set out on the website, but you will see them there. They are things like interviewing a client, legal drafting, legal research, presenting a case in before a judge or a magistrate. Those are the skills. And if you've got comparability on those two as you know, as part of your qualification in your home country, then you are on a strong basis for gaining an exemption from SQE 2. The other thing we need for it is that you have 2 years experience of actual legal practice. This could be before qualification as part of your qualification process. For instance, you know, a training contract as used to operate in England and Wales. A number of countries still operate a training contract system. Or it could be 2 years after qualification. Or in the case of some countries, for instance, I mean, Italy is an example, they do a 1-year training contract. So you could combine the year that you've done before qualification, which is mandatory, with 1 year's experience post qualification, but it needs to total up to 2 years. And if you can show us all those, then we can then grant you, assuming all those criteria are met, an exemption from the SQE 2 exam. So you can go basically straight from passing the SQE 1 to actually seeking admission as a solicitor. So that is an outline of SQE exemptions, and all the information is on the website. All the information is on the website. So following that, you then go on to seeking admission as a solicitor. So broadly, you've met our requirements. If you're a qualified lawyer, as I say, yes. So if you're a qualified lawyer, you can ignore the qualifying work experience bit of that jigsaw. You then come to us basically with the others. So you say, I have passed SQE 1 and SQE 2, or I have passed SQE 1 and I've exempt from SQE 2. I've got a degree or an equivalent qualification, which will normally be met by the education process in your own jurisdiction, and we recognise degrees and other qualifications worldwide. We normally look for a comparability to what on the UK framework is called level 6, and again, there's details and explanation of that on our website. Then we do screening for character and suitability at the point of admission. For anyone who's uncertain as to whether they might meet our suitability requirements, we also offer an early screening, a check, so that we can say, yes, you know, it's worth you going forward and going on the process to, you know, sit the SQE and qualify. The whole process is on our website, and the link is there. And then I will move to the last slide, which is, you know, this should be available on the video, but also I think, you know, I imagine that the British-Nigeria Law Forum and the Ghanaian Lawyers Union will be able to share these links with you. So your starting point is really our contact centre. You can email them, or there's also, if you look on our website, there's also a phone number you can call. They are your first port of call because you know, they can then either answer your question or refer you on if you've got a particularly detailed question. For example, I mentioned earlier, if you happen to have already gone part way down the old QLTS route and you're concerned that, you know, you've done half of it, but you've not yet done the second part, do contact our contact centre. There is also a separate source of information and in fact a separate website which is on the link there as well, for the actual SQE assessments. So this includes where you go to book onto the SQE. So general questions about sitting the SQE, or if you're a qualified lawyer and you want to know the process, you want to know more, you want to make an application, that's all through our website, and you contact the contact centre. For if you want to book onto the SQE, you want to see what dates it is or what the venues are, then you can go there. There is a separate website, sque.sra.org.uk, and there's also a different inquiry line which is on that slide. And finally, if you want to keep in touch, we have a LinkedIn groups for the SQE. We have resources on our website, and we also have an update which you can sign up to, SQE Update, which gives you the latest news about the assessment. One final thing which is not on the slide as well, if you want to know about how it's progressing and developing over its first sort of year or two, then we will be publishing reports shortly in the springtime, which really cover the first sort of year and a half of delivery of the SQE, and it has, we believe it's been very successful, and is really the way of the future that will provide a fair and open way for everyone to qualify. Everyone who has got the ability to become a solicitor will not face the barriers that they've had in the past of time constraints, of having to spend a lot of money up front, etc. Those kind of barriers, we hope that this is a big step in removing those and opening up the qualification to everyone who is capable of that level of competence and skill. So that's the end of my presentation, and thanks very much to Carol as well for covering all the kind of the bigger picture, as it were, which we thought was useful for you to have, even if you're particularly interested in the exemptions. But I think it's useful for you to get that bigger picture and what the SQE is about and why it's there as well. I'll stop sharing the screen now, and I will transfer the hosting back if I can.
Tim, just to say that there's been, I think Libby might be picking up now though, but there have been some questions posted in the chat which I've just jotting down quick answers to, but it looks like there are a few sort of common themes that it might be useful just to pick up as questions. But I think, Libby, are you going to pick up on this?
I think it's over to Fumbi now to field the questions.
Oh, right. Sorry, Libby. Thank you very much.
Yes, I was going to start the session. Thank you everyone for joining us so far. If you have any questions regarding the session so far, please do place your questions in the chat or raise your hand. Raise your hand if you would like to vocalize your questions on camera, or unmute yourself to ask your questions. Oh, we've just got a question here from Coyote. Kaide is asking, hi, Carol, regarding exemptions, can one apply for exemption from SQE 2 before taking the SQE 1?
Yes. You can. There's no order in which you can have those exemptions. The order applies when you have to take the assessment. So you can't take SQE 2 before you've taken and passed SQE 1. So you have to either have exemption from SQE 1 or have taken SQE 1 to go on and be able to take SQE 2. But it's possible to apply for exemption from SQE 2 before you've taken SQE 1. What we find is that candidates quite often do SQE 1 because it's very, very, very hard to get exemption from SQE 1. I don't want to give you the impression that it's quite an easy threshold to meet. Somebody's posted in the chat a question, which is, if you've got the LPC, can you get exemption from SQE 1? And the short answer is no, you can't. And the reason you can't is that what we are concerned about being able to see in an application is that an individual has applied their legal knowledge of law which is not substantially different to the law of England and Wales in all of the areas assessed in SQE 1 to the standard of a newly qualified solicitor. It's an incredibly high bar. But what we quite often find is that candidates who are possibly likely to get exemption from SQE 2 don't bother to make an application for exemption from SQE 2 until they've taken SQE 1. So they then make a decision, having passed SQE 1, they then decide whether or not they want to go for exemption from SQE 2, because an SQE 2 exemption has no value to you if you don't either have exemption from SQE 1 or you have passed SQE 1, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Carol. We have a few more questions. I'm going to put 2 questions as one. Some people would like to know what the timeline is for SQE 1, what the timeline is for the SQE 1 assessment, and what the timeline is for registration. And if SQE 1 can be taken in Ghana if there are no oral exams, and if anyone can do the SQE 1 outside of the UK.
Okay. You go, Tim.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And broadly, the website will give you better information than I can, because I don't have the dates of the assessments to hand, but they are running with, sort of fairly frequently every few months. And in terms of locations, again, those are on the website, or if you can't see the locations for the date that you would like to see, that you're thinking you might want to sit the exam, you can contact the inquiry line on the SQE website, and they will be able to help you. So broadly, they will assist with any questions you have about either venues or dates.
I can tell you that there is an SQE 1 delivery in July, and there is an SQE 1 delivery in January. Now, we will over time increase the number of deliveries, but at the moment that's sufficient to meet demand, because obviously we still have some people in the transitional routes. The booking windows open for some time before the actual assessment date, and as Tim says, what's on the website are the registration details, the registration dates. It will tell you when the booking windows open, and also the locations at which the assessment is available. So it's possible to sit SQE1 outside of the UK, and it's also possible to sit the written elements of SQE2 outside of the UK. But for the oral assessment, which is interviewing and advising and advocacy, you must come to the UK to complete the oral assessments for SQE2.
Fantastic. We do have a question here regarding if it's possible to be exempt from FLK1 and not FLK2.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Carry on, Carol. You carry on.
So it's possible to be exempt from FLK1 and FLK2, or only one of them. It's not possible to be exempt from only part of SQE2. So it's all or nothing for SQE2.
Great. If anyone else has any more questions, please do pop them into the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and I would gladly unmute you to ask your question. Yeah, so please ask all your questions now. Someone just asked, what's the fee for SQE 1 and 2?
Right, okay. I'm going to have to look that up for you. Again, it's on the website and it's not something I've committed to memory.
Yeah,
so if you just bear with me.
It used to be about 1,500 for SQE1 and 2,500 for SQE2. Carol will get the most up-to-date figures. But broadly, the fact that SQE2 is more expensive reflects the fact that the oral assessments have to be done on the one-to-one basis, you know, and at the particular UK test centres. Whereas SQE1 is done on the computer and so is relatively cheaper.
I'm just putting it in the chat.
Thank you, Carol. So if you're worried about the fees, please check into the chat. Ruby and Carol are putting up the price points at the moment. Thank you. Someone else had asked what other routes are available to qualified lawyers from other jurisdictions. So I'm guessing this person may have missed the earlier half of the session. If you would like.
Yeah, I mean there are no other routes is the quick answer. I mean broadly, the idea of the SQE is that it imposes or requires a certain standard of competence for everyone, and that is a standard which then allows everyone an equal chance to go for it, as it were, whatever their background or their route that they have followed. And also it gives the public assurance that every person who becomes a solicitor has been tested at the same standard. And that's why we brought the SQE in for both England, Wales candidates and for qualified lawyers from overseas.
Great, thank you. Someone had asked, what is the preferred training route for people who do not want to self-study? Do they go to Barbary or should they sign up for a training course with the University of Law?
There are a variety of training providers. They're listed on our website. We don't recommend or endorse any particular provider. You know, it's really for individuals to check out what they need and for, you know, so them to also look at the cost. I mean, clearly, you know, a full-time or a face-to-face course will cost a lot more than, say, an online part-time course, but there is a whole variety of provision. And of course, the idea is that also that there may be areas where you don't need particularly to train because you have learned the skills and the knowledge on the job.
Great. And someone had asked, could you please speak more on registered foreign lawyer qualification?
Registered foreign lawyer?
Yes, more on the registered foreign lawyer qualification.
Right, well, a registered foreign lawyer is not a qualification as such. Registered foreign lawyer is a foreign lawyer who's registered with us. And the reason that a foreign lawyer would register with us is because they want to become a manager or a partner in an England and Wales law firm. So broadly, we can say, well, we could have a law firm that consists of both English solicitors and Nigerian lawyers. But in order that we have knowledge of who is running that firm and we can exercise our regulatory control over the firm, the lawyers who are not English solicitors, they register with us. Apart from that, we don't regulate them. They're still regulated by their own national bar or law society. But what we do is we just keep a register of them so that we have got the names and the kind of details, practice details of every individual who is a partner or a manager of an England and Wales law firm. So that's a registered foreign lawyer. You know, as I say, they're not subject to our requirements. For instance, our code of conduct. They're subject to their own country's, you know, sort of ethics and, you know, practice requirements.
Great, thank you. We do have some more questions. Please, everyone, please send in your final questions now. We'll be ending the session very shortly.
Yeah.
So please do send in your
I see there's a question about the lists of countries with exemptions. Yes.
And what the procedure is.
Yes, what we have is a situation, if we go back to the idea of the exemption and what a lawyer has to demonstrate. A lawyer has to demonstrate that they've got the practice rights, as I said. They have to demonstrate that they've got those skills that are assessed in the SQE too, and that they've got 2 years experience, which can be gained before or after qualification. Now, if the actual qualification of being a lawyer in a country includes all those things, so you imagine the local bar or law society contacts us, they fill in our form and they say, actually, all lawyers who qualify in our country have all these practice rights. They are tested, they're assessed in these skills, and we have a 2-year or more training contract that they have to do before they qualify. Then not just the individual meets our requirements, the whole of that profession will meet our requirements. So, for example, the first one that applied was Denmark, and they came to us and they said, our lawyers have the same practice rights as English lawyers. They are assessed in all the same skills, and they do a 3-year training contract before they can be admitted. So what we've done for every profession that provides, or every jurisdiction that provides us with that information, we can then give them what we call an agreed exemption, which applies to all the lawyers who are qualified in that jurisdiction. And the lawyer still has to make an application via our website, but then we put it on a system called auto-grant, which enables us to process it very quickly and without that lawyer having to provide all the details, which have already been provided by the local bar. So there's about, there's now sort of 15 or so of those jurisdictions, and obviously we are open to applications from, from any jurisdiction that wants to apply and, on behalf of its whole profession.
Fantastic. I guess this will be the final 2 questions we have for the evening. Someone would like to know what happens to lawyers who study the LPC and went ahead to get qualified in another country, and how do they qualify to practice in England without a TC if that begins to prove difficult?
So there is oh, Carol, you carry on. I've been doing a few. You have a go.
No. So if you're a qualified lawyer with the LPC, is that what the question is about? That it's an individual who's got the LPC, but they're also qualified in a lawyer in a different country. Is that right?
I think they've done the LPC, but they haven't qualified to be a lawyer here, but they've qualified to be a lawyer elsewhere.
Okay, that's right.
The LPC course.
Okay, so if they're a qualified lawyer, in another country elsewhere, then they are eligible to seek exemption. Yeah, so it's the qualified lawyer status that makes them eligible for exemption. If they also have the LPC doesn't really have any value. It doesn't have any currency in the application process. If they're a qualified lawyer and, as Tim said, they've got practice rights and 2 years professional work experience, then they're likely to get exemption from SQE 2. If they have practiced, if they have applied the law that's assessed in SQE 1 at the standard of a newly qualified solicitor, they will get exemption from SQE 1. The LPC, although elements of it map in content, if you like, to SQE 1. So on the LPC, an individual will have done civil litigation, will have done business organisations, will have done property law and practice. So there's quite a lot of content which is assessed in SQE 1, but it's assessed at a very different standard. So when you do the LPC, it prepares you for a training contract. When you do SQE 1, it's a point of qualification exam. So it's a test of whether or not you have reached the competence of a newly qualified solicitor. So the LPC and SQE 1, although they look similar in terms of content, they are not similar in terms of standard. Plus, there are other things that are tested in SQE 1 that are not included on the LPC. For example, equity in trusts, land law, criminal law and practice is assessed on the LPC, but sort of core principles of criminal law isn't. Tort, contract, constitutional law, these are not things that are included in the LPC.
The other thing I should add is if someone does have the LPC, there is also our transitional arrangements can apply to individuals who've done the LPC. And if you go onto our website, you'll see a section for the transitional arrangements, and you can look at that. Or if in doubt, contact our contact centre.
Excellent. I guess our very final question would be, are there any recommended books to prepare for the exams?
Yeah, there's legal publishers who publish SQE prep books, and they are listed along with the training course providers on our website. I think Blackstone's do a series. I'm trying to remember what the other ones are. Routledge, I think there's 2 or 3 well-known legal publishers who do books. So yeah, and as I say, details of fact. The website, the fact that we list people on our website is not a recommendation or an endorsement or anything like that, but it provides you with a place to find out and decide what's right for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to Tim and Carol for taking out time to walk us through the SQE for qualified lawyers. I believe the evening has been very helpful to everyone. And thank you to all the team from SRA who's been answering questions and providing links in the chat. So for everyone who's wondering about live sample questions, list of recommendations of providers, please check out the SRA website as recommended. Some people were asking if they'll be able to access the slides, Tim. Will it be available?
Yes, I mean, the set of slides I think is with the British-Nigeria Law Forum and the British-Ghanaian Lawyers Union. So I think just you know, they're in the public domain, as it were. Yeah. So yes, please do. And as I say, the one thing which I would recommend is do look at our website, and do, if you have any doubts at all, contact our contact centre, because they will be able to put you in the right direction. And if it's a particularly tricky question, again, they can feed it through to staff who will be able to advise. So, you know, it's we're there. We aim to be able to help with anyone's situation and advise them accordingly. So do contact our contact center with any queries.
Excellent. To everyone who's joined us for this session today, could you, okay, someone just quickly asked, is there exemptions for Nigerians who are qualified? So those who've gotten called to the Nigerian Bar Association.
We have, I can say that we have processed, I don't know about the outcomes of them, but we've certainly processed, and I think they, you know, I've not been aware of issues with processing them, certainly, from quite a number of lawyers from Nigeria and also some from Ghana. So I think the figures are in the sort of 10s and 20s for Nigeria, and perhaps in single figures for Ghanaian lawyers for exemptions from SQE2. We're not aware of any applications yet regarding SQE1, but as I've said, those are, you know, much rarer. It's a much bigger ask, basically, to get an exemption from SQE1. SQE2 is more straightforward, and certainly if there's anyone who is a qualified lawyer in Nigeria or Ghana, you know, do look at our website and do make an application if you think it applies to you.
Tim, I'm not aware of any application we've had from the jurisdiction itself for you.
No.
No, I think that's just a question in the chat.
Is there a question that, yes, yeah. I mean, my own understanding, but again, this is at one remove because I haven't dealt with actual applications. We advise on the policy behind the applications rather than the applications themselves. But my understanding at an earlier stage of it was that the training contract in Ghana is not, if there is one, it's not 2 years in length. And so I don't think there'd be an agreed exemption, although, you know, I could be wrong. That's based on, you know, just my impression. We would certainly look at any application from Nigeria or Ghana if the you know, if the bar wanted to make an application. We would certainly, you know, look at it carefully and put an agreed exemption in place if it was possible.
Excellent. Thank you once again to Tim and Carol for taking out the time this evening, and to the SRA team once again, thank you so much. For everyone who's joined us this evening, on behalf of the British-Nigerian Law Firm and the British-Ghanaian Lawyers Union, we say thank you for joining our event. Please do follow us on social media. You can find the British-Ghanaian Law Union at BGLU on Instagram, on Twitter, as well as for the BNLF, you can find us at British-Nigerian Law Firm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. The BGLU is also on LinkedIn, so please join our pages, join our groups, and please send us a message if you'd like to join any of our WhatsApp group chats that we have. In regards to accessing the recording and the slideshows, please do send us a message on all our social medias, and we shall get that all to you. So thank you all once again for joining us this session, and we hope you have a fantastic evening wherever you are in the world. So
thanks very much from us as well. Thanks. It's good to see so many participants and such a level of interest in this. So thank you.
And can I say that for anyone who sort of joined us late, we are having a webinar in May for qualified lawyers and exemptions. So if there's some questions that occur to you after the event, and we can send out details of the webinar, we can send them out to you and to the Law Society, and then they can circulate that just in case for some of you who didn't quite get into the chat room on time.
That would be ideal. Thank you so much. For everyone asking, please, you can follow the British-Ghanaian Lawyers Union at BGLU on Instagram, Twitter. They also have a LinkedIn page. And you can also follow the British-Nigerian Law Firm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We also have our Junior Lawyers Division, the BNLF JLD, at BNFJLD on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So if you want to get in touch with us, please follow us on all our social medias. And please be in touch if you want access to the recording, the slideshows. And as Carol said, please check out the events on the SRA website to sign up for the webinar. And we will happily distribute that to you as well. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Thank
Good
you,
night.
again, Carol.